Welcome to Openly Spoken, the podcast to help you show up, speak out, and be seen within your relationships, your work, and most importantly, with the relationship with yourself. In this podcast, we talk about all things self-love, relationships, sexuality, spirituality, and more. Hi, I'm your host, Celia Antonio, and I'm a women's sexuality and self-love coach, a mindfulness expert, and your cheerleader for your most grounded and expansive self-expression. You can connect with me on Instagram at self-expressedbabe, and for all of my guest episodes, there will always be links in the show notes so that you can find them online. I give my deepest thanks to you for being here and spending your precious time with me today. Now let's begin our journey. So today we are going to chat about, I'm going to share with you my relationship journey. Because my relationship journey is something I didn't really realize until recently. It's a huge kind of understanding that goes into the work that I do now as a self-love, pleasure, and relationship coach. And so I just my purpose of sharing my story is for you to see if anything resonates, for you to, if maybe you're going through any of the things that I went through in the past, for you to maybe get some insights, some tips from this episode, and to also know that you are not alone. And if you do desire one-on-one support through your relationship journey, and you are a woman or you are someone who grew up socialized as a girl or a woman, then my one-on-one offering Passionate Pulse is probably something that you would want to look into. I will link that in the show notes, but I'll talk about it a little bit more towards the end of today's conversation. So where do I begin? I'm just going to put my feet up on my desk, and that probably doesn't look too great on the video. I'm not sure where to begin. I took down a couple of notes. Okay, so I didn't really date in high school. My parents were never really open with me to talk about dating. I never even got a sex talk. To this day, I have never talked to my parents about sex. And then I also grew up in a very strict household. If you listen to my last solo episode, you'll know that I was raised by someone who comes from a really strict culture. My dad, who is my stepdad, but I call him dad since I've known him since I was 2. And he's the father I grew up with. And I am in touch with my biological father now, which plays a role in my relationship journey. So we'll definitely talk about that. But his culture, coming from Pakistan and coming from an Islamic culture, is very strict about dating. I, got the message that dating was not allowed and didn't even really ask as I got older, if it was okay now. Didn't really feel safe to ask questions of that nature in the first place. And I do, oh my gosh, a memory is coming up to share that kind of will show you why I felt scared to ask. And I did not expect to share this on the podcast, but I remember being about 8 years old, and it was summertime, and there was a summer camp that I was going to in Washington. And this time we lived in Renton, Washington. And there was this boy in summer camp. I remember his name was CJ. I don't remember what he looks like, or I don't remember anything except for His name was CJ, and I really liked him. I had a crush on him. And I remember writing about having a crush on this boy, and I was 7 or 8. I think I might have been 7. I was really young. And I was writing about how I liked him, how he was cute. And I wrote that I want to have sex with him. And I had no idea what sex was at this age. No idea whatsoever. I just knew that sex was something that couples do. I knew that sex was something that like two people who are in a relationship do together. I knew that sex was where babies come from. And I learned all this, in school from other kids talking. And yet I had no idea what sex really was. I had no idea. I probably thought it was like cuddling or something. Like I honestly had no idea whatsoever. And I remember my stepdad coming into the room as I was writing about this boy. And he was like, "What are you writing?" And I'm like, "Oh, nothing." Like, I didn't want to show it to him. And being the person that he is, he got that paper that I wrote, and he read it, and he obviously got really upset because his 7-year-old daughter is writing about wanting to have sex with a boy. And I got in so much trouble for that. And, nothing was ever explained to me of why he was upset. There were no questions asked to me of like, what do I think sex is? Like, where did I learn about it? It was just treated as this. It was honestly very traumatizing. And so from that day forward, I just kind of learned as a child that crushes and all of that, everything in that realm is something I need to keep a secret, because if I don't, I will get in trouble. And I also like subconsciously learned that stuff was also like bad. And then, purity culture growing up around that, I'm sure added to that. So I guess like that's where my relationship journey kind of starts with that situation in my childhood, because then that was where I learned that it was not okay to talk about those things in my household. And so then I didn't really date in high school. I remember my freshman year of high school, there was this one guy who asked me to be his girlfriend, and we were together for like exactly a month, and we like never kissed or anything, because I was just like by that age, I was so terrified of talking to my parents about, relationships I was in. And it really affected how I should have been relationship, because there was just so much freeze and shut down and fear. And, and then eventually, once I think it was like my junior year, I was like, I don't think he was my boyfriend. I think we were like casually seeing each other. Once I got to my junior year in high school, there was this one guy that I remember I brought him home to meet my parents. But the only reason why I did that was because my parents at that point were in a space where they were like, if you go hang out with anyone, we need to meet them. And so that's why I brought him over. And I never really had a serious boyfriend until I was 18. And when we first started seeing each other, I also brought him to meet my parents just because I wanted to be able to hang out with him. And at that time, I was less scared to tell my parents, although when I first introduced him, I was like, this is my friend. And then they eventually, caught on. But I wasn't as scared because I was 18 and I'm like, by law, I'm an adult. I can do what I want now. But I was still living with my parents at that point. So I I like had them meet him. I also was, on my own going to college at that time and taking public transportation to go to college. So sometimes I honestly would just go to my boyfriend's house and my parents would think I was going to school. Sorry, Mom. Sorry, Dad. So that's where the journey started. And in this first serious relationship, we were together for 6 years. And it was pretty unhealthy. And the reason why it wasn't healthy is because the way I learned to be in my home, was that men are in charge and you are in service to men. Like that's just what I learned from being raised by the dad I was raised by, who I know, tried his best. No hard feelings here whatsoever. I've done so much work around this stuff. And also just by things that we were kind of taught by the culture, and by having his mom and his sister live with us for a little bit when I was really young. It was very much about when your dad comes home, have a glass of water ready for him. And it was just there was this culture that was taught to us of women are in service to men. And that's very obviously seen in culture from Pakistan. And, that was the culture I was raised around. So going into this relationship, I had a very hard time really expressing what I felt. I would hold down my emotions if I was upset about something. And what else? This person that I dated very much reminded me of my stepdad. And I even noticed that back then. I thought, that's weird. There are a lot of things, a lot of parallels, but I hadn't yet done really any self-development work to learn about relationships at that point. So I didn't know that we usually do end up in relationships with our caretakers if we are still trying to heal the wounds from that realm with that caretaker. So he very much reminded me of my stepfather in a way where he was very controlling. I don't want to say I was not allowed to hang out with friends, but when I did, it was just such a hassle. There was so much of, oh, you're going out with your girlfriends, you're gonna, meet someone and leave me. There was so much insecurity from this partner. And for me, there was so much people pleasing and codependency present that I ended up just slowly stopping all my relationships with my friendships outside of this relationship. And I was so isolated and I was so unhappy. And we were together, I want to say, for 2 years before we moved in together. And we lived together for 4 years. And it was just it was really unhealthy. What helped me finally break away from this relationship was, like I shared in the Body Love episode, the last solo episode, I talked about how I started going to yoga because my first job out of university really caused me a lot of stress. And I'm like, oh, yoga is good for stress. Going to yoga and having time to breathe deeply, to make space to just be in my body helped me notice more how unhappy I was in the relationship I was in. And it helped me actually do something about it rather than just settling for it. Like it was there, it was front and center, and it was like, you cannot ignore this because it is just creating all this anxiety in your body because you're not supposed to be here. Like, this has run its course. It's time to walk away. But there were still so many like ingrained codependency things. And so I did not know I was going to get this vulnerable, but I know that this will help someone. And, this is definitely things that I've already processed. So I feel resourced in sharing this. Because of my deep codependency that I had at that time, I was not able to walk away from the relationship until I had someone else's arms to fall into. And I share this because I know I'm not the only one in doing that. And if you are listening and you notice that you are someone that has a pattern of doing this, this is your nudge to take responsibility for that, to start to ease yourself into the work, to learn about how to choose yourself over other people, because that's really what is happening when you are not okay with being single. You're not choosing to be in a relationship with yourself. Like, my overall relationship journey has taught me that cultivating the relationship with yourself, including taking care of your own pleasure and sexual and intimacy needs. Like, if I knew what I know now about self-pleasure, if I knew that in high school, oh my God, I would have been way less desperate for attention. I would have been like totally okay being in my own energy, and even in my early 20s, like I would have been totally fine being in my own energy. And what's interesting about that is like, that's what actually attracts a healthy partner, because looking back at this first unhealthy relationship, the reason why I attracted an unhealthy relationship and attracted someone that didn't want me to live my own life and have my own friends and have my own opinions and be my own person is because that was how I was being. I was being someone who was like, oh, I'll just wait on you hand and foot, and I'll just take care of you, and my needs don't matter. So I was able to break away from that relationship once I knew that there was someone else that I could start casually seeing. And so that was what helped me walk away. And we were living together, so I did move back in with my mom for a year. And this next relationship lasted super briefly. It was a very casual relationship, very quick relationship. A lot of shit happened, and I was still doing yoga throughout this relationship, and I think that is why it only lasted, I think it was 2 months, maybe 3 months. It was very short. Because with the practice of being mindful, I was like, hey, you're in the same situation here, and it actually might be worse. It might be worse. Like, I was definitely going out more, socializing more, having more fun. But the experience of being alone with this person was like 10 times worse than the first serious relationship I was in. And so I was able to break things off because of my yoga practice. I had decided to go all in on my yoga practice and to sign up for a yoga teacher training. And at that time, I had no intention whatsoever to be a yoga teacher. I just wanted to deepen my practice. I wanted to be able to know that I was doing the poses correctly so that I wouldn't injure myself. And I really only signed up for a personal journey, personal deepening of it. And so after signing up for that and deciding like, yeah, this is what I'm going to dedicate to. I'm going to dedicate to my self-love. I was like, I need to walk away from this relationship. And so that's exactly what I did. And there's something that happened afterwards that I kind of want to share, but I think this could be a whole separate episode. And I'm not sure I want to share. I feel like I kind of want to keep that bit to myself. So we will skip over that for now. Yeah, so I dedicated to my yoga practice. I became a woman who was totally okay with being in her own energy, and was just focusing on myself and was not worried about being in a relationship. Didn't care about I just wanted to have fun. So I would go out and I would go on dates, but I wasn't like looking for a boyfriend or looking for someone to be serious with. And this was when I was 25, and that honestly was so much fun to just be free, to go out finally, because my first relationship, I was with him from 18 to 25, and I just never went anywhere. I did go out and socialize in the beginning of the relationship, and I quickly learned that was not, it was not welcomed by my partner at that time. So then when I was just about finishing up with my yoga teacher training, I think my yoga teacher training was 6 months long. It was a longer training. And I remember that was why I signed up, because I saw other trainings that were a weekend long immersion or 2 weeks or something really short. I was I want something longer so that I can really integrate and let the knowledge sink in and let the practice sink in and take time. Towards the end, I met someone who we were in a relationship for 3.5 years. And it was the first relationship where I really was wow, men like this exist. And I'm realizing that there's one piece I did leave out of something that happened right before the end of my last relationship and going into this one. So I mentioned earlier that we usually date from a place of having a wound with a caretaker that we are trying to kind of heal, or an unmet need that we are trying to receive from someone that reminds us of a caretaker. Usually that creates this dynamic where we date people that subconsciously remind us of a caretaker in the attempt to get the need met. And what's interesting about that is, because they are very similar to the caretaker, they most likely don't even have the capacity or ability to meet that need. So then that is why we can end up on these patterns and these cycles of constantly dating the same type of person, or how some people say constantly dating assholes, or which I don't like saying, because that stigmatizes a part of our body that we all have. We all have an asshole. And yeah, that's a whole different topic about derogatory terms from body parts. So besides dedicating and devoting myself to my yoga practice towards the end of that second 2-3 month long relationship, one other thing happened. So growing up, I grew up with my stepfather, and my biological dad was never talked about. Although I knew the entire time, because my mom and I moved to America when I was 3, and my stepfather and my mom got married when I was 3, and having the experience now of having worked with kids in the past. I used to work at a daycare. A 3-year-old child already knows who their father is. 3-year-olds might not know they might not know how to formulate a perfect sentence with grammar, but they know who their parents are. So I knew the entire time that my stepdad was not my dad. In my mind, like, I remember being like, oh, like, one of my earliest memories is telling him, oh, I have 2 dads now. And, yeah, so I knew, but at the same time, nobody around me was telling me what was going on. And then I, have this father now who's like super strict, and kind of got the message that it's unsafe to ask questions. So I just never asked. And this was a really deep wound that I had to really show up for myself for. I remember being like 7 years old, crying myself to sleep at night because like I really just wanted to know where my dad was, connect with my dad. Like I didn't remember what he was like, what he looked like, or what his energy was like, but I just knew that he was out there somewhere, and he wasn't here with me, and nobody was talking about it. And I even like wondered if my mom and I were sisters instead of my mom being my mom, because my mom was 18 years old when she had me. So there was just so much that I had to move with, like, on my own. And luckily for me, my grandfather, my mom on my dad's side, and he was, I think I was about 8 or 9, maybe older. I was like 9 or 10. I was a little bit older. I was still a child, but I was like a little bit older. We were at the park once, and he asked me, he was like, do you know that, like, do you know about your dad? Like, he just like curiously asked me, and I was like, oh, finally an adult was like saying something. And yeah, he just basically confirmed with me that my stepdad wasn't my biological dad. And he told me that he would give my biological dad some photos of me, and that he talks to him and all this stuff. And that was basically it. Like, through the years, like, he was open with me about my dad, but I never made contact. I never asked what his name was. He asked me, I remember once, if I wanted to see a photo of my dad, and I was like, no. Like, I was really scared. I was really scared to broach the topic, because like the way I was raised, it was just like anything and everything I do, my parents will eventually find out about it and I'll get in trouble. Like, that was like the mindset I had. Like, you're always being watched, or like, yeah, because there were some instances or things like that, things similar to like my journal entry from 7 years old where I wrote about my crush CJ. Like, that was not the only time something like that happened. That was like an invasion of privacy. So once I was 21, or maybe 20. When I was 20, I moved out. And because I had my own space, I was finally like, okay, yeah, send me a photo of my dad. I want to see. Because being in my own space, I'm like, okay, my parents are going to be here to like look through my sock drawer and find this. So now it's safe. So I asked for a photo, and I saw a picture of my dad for the first time, and I was like 20. And eventually I asked, maybe at that same time, I don't remember, I asked my grandfather to find out my father's mailing address so I can send him a letter. And I wrote him a letter. I don't really remember what I said, but I gave him my contact information, gave him my email. And I remember being in university, and it was this morning English class I was in, and me and my friend Stephanie would always come early, and we would, be using the computer in class. And I remember, like, this was a special memory I shared with her. We still, when we do connect, sometimes we bring this up. So shout out to Stephanie if you are listening to this episode right now. I remember being like, oh, because I got an email from my biological dad. And we emailed back and forth a couple of times. And a couple of years later, he decides he's going to visit me. And he visited me towards the tail end of that second relationship, that 2 to 3 month long relationship. He visited me towards the tail end. I was already like with one foot out the door. He came to visit. And yeah, it was an interesting experience meeting my biological dad. Firstly, before he visited, I remember calling my stepdad because we didn't live in the same state at that time. And just like having such a hard time voicing out the words that, like, you know, I've connected with my stepdad. He's going to come visit. I just want to let you know, because I don't want you to see a photo of us on Facebook and, you know, think that I'm like ungrateful for you or like replacing you or anything like that. So we had like that was like a nice opportunity to have that lovely conversation with him. And yeah, so my biological dad, I was 25 by the time I met my biological dad. And you can imagine if you have a baby and when they're the age of 3, they leave with their other parent all the way across an ocean to a different country, and then you don't see them again until they're 25. You can imagine how excited he was, like how much energy he had and how much he wanted to just like hold me tight and hug me. And then for me, he's like this total stranger, and I'm like, oh my God, this like middle-aged man wants to hug me, and like he's a stranger to me, but also, you know, we've been emailing, so it was uncomfortable. And I remember being able to sit with the discomfort and being self-aware of the discomfort because of my yoga practice. I remember being like, I remember being able to understand his experience and to also notice how I was anxious about letting him into my heart. And yeah, so that was interesting. And eventually I don't remember how long he stayed, but in the beginning of this day, he was like staying somewhere else. And then eventually we wanted to spend more time together. So he stayed with me at my boyfriend's house at the time, the person that we were only together for 2 to 3 months. He stayed with us. And when he stayed with us, I remember my dad would ask me at night, like, what time's your alarm set for the morning? Like, what time are you getting up? And he would then make a point to wake up before my alarm and make me breakfast. And just like so many things that my dad did in that first visit. Oh my God, I'm getting emotional. So many things that he did in that first visit was just so satiating and so just like, wow, like it's so foreign to me to be treated in this way by a man. Like, so much love, and God, it was just so beautiful. And I feel like that, like as soon as that visit was over, and once I touched that kind of love, I was like, the fuck am I doing in this relationship? Like, this guy doesn't fucking appreciate me. He doesn't respect me. That, along with the devotion to the yoga practice, really helped me walk away. And ever since that first visit with my dad, with my biological dad, the way, like the type of person that I dated was like, it was a complete night and day difference. And I feel really grateful that I actually like my dad, because not everyone has that experience. A lot of people meet their fathers for the first time and don't actually like them, who they are as a person. But I fucking love my dad. He's one of my favorite people. And I actually talk to him more now than I do to the two parents that raised me, which is interesting. So after having that experience, I just focused on my yoga, focused on being single, focused on being in my own energy. And then I, like, from that magnetism and that radiance, I attracted a new partner eventually. I remember he asked me out on 11/11. Like, that was like when he officially was like, will you be my girlfriend? And it was just such, like, remembering me at the beginning of that relationship, I was so happy. I was like, yes, finally. Like, I knew that there was love like this out there. And yeah, so what do I want to share about that? Because that relationship is over and I'm glad it's over. Because, okay, so there's some bits and pieces about this relationship that I've shared in my email list. And I guess I'll share a bit of that here. So on my email list recently, I shared a newsletter, which I'm going to link a page that will take you to some self-love resources on my website. And if you pick one of them or all of them, it will add you to my newsletter, which goes out every Wednesday. And I shared one day on this newsletter about, so I still use Facebook because I'm old. I'm 34. And when you go onto Facebook, it's like, oh, here are your memories from 8 years ago that, like, maybe you want to share them. And I remember at first it was just like so fucking annoying that memories would come up with this ex-partner. And it's only until last year, I think. I want to say it was until last year where those photos come up and I start to just have so much gratitude that I had that experience. And I just look straight into my own eyes and I'm like, thank you. Like, thank you for everything that you ended up doing and leaning into, because it led to who I am now. Oh, getting emotional again over that. Oh my gosh. So I got curious and I shared on my Facebook status. I was like, hey, I'm curious. What do you all do when Facebook Memories shows you a photo of your ex? And has that reaction changed over the years? Why or why not? And I also was like, if you want to share this privately, feel free to DM me. And I was surprised that most people commented. There was maybe 1 or 2 comments that were not like this, but most people were like, oh, it's a reminder to delete. I delete the photo. I delete the memory. And I'm just like, no, that's so sad. That's so sad. Why would you it's a part of your past. It's a part of growth. And yeah, we all have, I know it exists that there are some relationships that are majorly abusive that you don't ever want to be reminded of. And how powerful would it be if you were shown a photo and you are not triggered by it? And that's a part of what you get to lean into if you do the work around self-love, around sexuality, around relationships. And if you want to get clear on where you want to go next with self-love, relationships, pleasure, sexuality, I'm going to link in the show notes below a, what did I call it? Clear Desire Blueprinting session. And it'll be a free session. We will get clear on what you desire and what you want. And at the end, if it resonates, just so that you have consent going into this, in the end, I might share my one-on-one work. And if you are interested, the conversation about my one-on-one work will be a different call. So I just want you to know that this call, you will get 100% clear on your desires. And if you do just that one call, that can shift so much, getting clear on your desires. So, so in this relationship, I still did have a flavor of not always fully voicing what I felt, because now here I am in this relationship that was like so great that I didn't realize this at the time, but I realize it now. It was so great that I was like afraid of losing it. I was like, no, hold on to him. Like, he's the one I'm marrying. Like, hold on tight. And that meant that even when there were things that were in misalignment, I didn't speak up for it, or I didn't I just kind of like settled for that. And those were just like little things. Like there was one point in our relationship where I was teaching yoga until 6 a.m. and he was bartending until 5 a.m. So we were on opposite schedules and we wanted opposite things. And I was still just like, nope, let me hold on. And we ended up moving to 2 different states. And at the end of our relationship, we had just moved to New York City 6 months prior, when he broke up with me. And it was my first time being dumped. And let me tell you, if you have never been dumped, if you've never been dumped and then you get dumped for the first time, it's like, it fucking sucks. And also, if you are willing to show up for yourself and show up for what you are truly feeling, it is the biggest transformation, one of the biggest transformations that you'll ever experience in your life. So, you can imagine like living in a new city, in New York City of all places, where the friends you have made so far, you've only known them for a few months, and there's no family around, and then the one person that you know who happens to be your partner breaks up with you. So it was really, really fucking hard. And with that relationship, I signed up for this workshop about a week before our relationship ended. And it was an embodiment workshop. And I didn't really know like what I was getting myself into. It was a friend had invited me. And then when this relationship ended, I didn't want to cancel on my friend. I'm like, I'm still going to show up. So I walk into this embodiment workshop. It's 3 days after the breakup. I'm fucking heartbroken. I'm like, I vividly remember having this thought as I walked into the door that like freezing cold Brooklyn morning. I think it was like 8 a.m. or something. It was an early class. I vividly remember thinking, I will never be happy again. And going into this space where we were guided to just like process our emotions without words. We were guided to scream and kick and punch pillows and cry and move every emotion that we were feeling, like to allow it to be there, to be present. It was a whole like hour-long session. It was less of a workshop and more of a session, like a practice that a small group was guided through, and we were blindfolded. And at the very end of this session it was like the very last 10 minutes of it. Mind you, I've been blindfolded for like 45 minutes at this point. The way it ended was there was this beautiful flute music that played, and we were invited to dance around the room while we're still blindfolded. And I remember at the beginning of those 10 minutes of dancing, I was moving very timidly because I didn't want to stub my toe or bump into somebody because I can't see, I'm blindfolded. And as I moved and like noticed that, you know, I was safe because the practitioner there, the facilitator there was very good about coming near you when you were getting too close to someone else or getting too close, and like just like gently nudging you. So once I knew that it was safe to move, this like weird thing happened where I was, you know, thinking about how connected this was to where exactly I was in my life, where I didn't know what was ahead of me. And I was really afraid to step forward on my own in this big city with like friends that I'd only known for a few months. Like I was essentially alone. Family was gone, and this person that I loved so much was gone out of my life. And now, you know, life moving forward would not have him in it when I thought I was going to marry him. And I'm like, that's exactly what's happening here. Like I'm afraid to move forward. So once I started unleashing and dancing around the room and just like prancing around the room, and that I was safe, it was just like a deeply embodied experience of like, I don't know what is coming up next, but I know that I'm safe. And I know that the universe has got me. I know that I'm supported. I know that it's going to be okay. And after walking into that session with the thought of I'll never be happy again, walking out, I was like smiling ear to ear. I was blissful, like authentically blissful, not like just putting on a smile to make it through the breakup I was going through. And that's not to say that I like never cried again over this person. Like all emotions move in waves. So I definitely probably, you know, cried that night again or cried 2 days later. It was a long healing journey of just riding the waves of my emotions. And this session I went to was happening at this yoga studio. I wish I remember the name, but it was in Brooklyn. It was right next to not Central Park, Prospect Park, right off of one of the Q train stops. Don't remember the name. I wish I did. I want to say it starts with a B. I don't know. I can't remember. They hosted this same workshop only once a month. So you best believe I signed myself up and I kept coming back every month. And at that time I was teaching yoga and waitressing, and I noticed that if I had a waitressing shift on the same day, where in the morning I was in this session, I would make so much money in tips because my energy was just like clear. Like I was like genuinely just so happy to be alive. It was wild. I also started going to therapy, and I remember I would like force myself to go to the gym, and I was, you know, making sure to make plans with friends. And I was still like, as I was doing all these things, I was still making sure I had space where there was nothing on my schedule and I could just be at home and cry and, you know, actually just like fully feel and hold myself. And it was really messy. I even like cried on the subway in public so many times. If you've never cried in public in front of people, you've probably never lived long term in New York City. And it is such a humbling experience because sometimes a stranger will just, you know, put a box of tissues over you and you're like, yeah, thank you. The people in New York City are really, really kind. Really like best human beings. Like being in New York City and just like witnessing what happens on the subway and how strangers help each other really gave me so much hope for humanity. And even going through this breakup gave me so much love for humanity, because it was essentially a like process of grief and of knowing that everyone you have in your life, it's not guaranteed they'll be there forever, whether it is through death or whether it is through, their own decision or your decision to end the relationship or a move or, any life transition. And so that breakup happened in February of 2014. And the craziest thing happened by the time it was August 2014. I was engaged to my now husband. And don't worry, I didn't meet my husband that same year. Like we had known each other for 16 years already. He was one of my childhood closest friends. We actually used to be next door neighbors. And we had always kept in touch throughout the years, birthdays, holidays. We would text each other or message on Facebook. And he reached out to me and, wish it was like a holiday that he wished me happy. It was probably Valentine's Day. And that was when I was like, yeah, thanks for the well wishes for me and my boyfriend, but we're actually not together anymore. Like we just broke up like 2 weeks ago. And so eventually he like confessed his feelings to me, and I'm like, I can't right now. Like I'm very heartbroken. I am in no space to be in another relationship right now. And so he was really patient, and eventually we ended up getting engaged. And having had the experience that I had, and also with his own relationship experience, when we first got together, we were talking about how grateful we were that we didn't date when we were teenagers and living next door to each other, because we shared like how we used to act in our first relationships and like all these things that we learned. And we realized that had we dated when we were teenagers, and we did have a little bit of attraction for each other, had we dated then, like it wouldn't have lasted. It wouldn't have ended on good terms, and like we probably wouldn't have kept in touch for as long as we kept in touch up until that point. And so now I am married to someone I have known for 21 years, and we were friends for 16 years before we ever became romantic. And we got married in 2022. We are coming up to our second wedding anniversary in April. And so that is my relationship story. I hope that it was inspiring for me to share my relationship story with you today. If you resonate with any part of this story, like if you are going through a breakup, if you realize that there's a certain dating pattern that you keep dating the same type of person, or if you just want an expansion in your experience of dating and of self-love and even of pleasure, because it's all connected, and you want one-on-one support in doing this, I'm your girl. So linked below is my one-on-one coaching called Passionate Pulse. It's a 5-month coaching space. And I'm also going to link below my Clear Desire blueprinting session. That is a totally free session where you are going to get super clear on what you want within the realms of sex, love, and relationships. And if it resonates at the end, maybe we'll end up working together. If not, it really gives me so much joy to serve you in becoming clear with your desires, because that really is the starting point to creating a whole new reality when it comes to sex, love, and relationships. So thank you so much for listening to my long, rambly, and vulnerable relationship story, and I will see you in the next episode. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Openly Spoken. I know that there's an abundance of content online, so I really appreciate you giving me your ears today. If this episode shifted something for you, please share this with a friend and/or write us a podcast review if you're listening to this on iTunes so that more people can find this. If anything shifted for you from this episode that you want to have a conversation about, I would love to hear from you. Just send me a DM over on Instagram at selfexpressbabe, and that is in the show notes. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.